In this episode, we focus on a phase that often determines whether compliance and security improvements actually stick, monitoring and validating remediation actions until risk is truly reduced. After an audit finding or a discovered gap, organizations often create a remediation plan with owners and dates, and there is a sense of relief because the problem feels handled. The danger is that plans can be closed on paper while the underlying risk remains, either because actions were not completed fully, were implemented inconsistently, or did not address the root cause. Real risk reduction requires evidence that the remediation actions have changed behavior and control performance over time. Monitoring is the ongoing activity of tracking progress, ensuring work does not stall, and watching for signs that the issue is recurring. Validation is the activity of proving that the remediation achieved its intended outcome and that the control now operates reliably. For beginners, the key idea is that remediation is not a box you check. It is a change you must confirm in reality. This lesson teaches how to keep the organization disciplined through the full life cycle of remediation, from assignment to completion to sustained operation. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A useful starting point is understanding why remediation often fails to reduce risk even when tasks are completed. One reason is that the remediation action addresses symptoms, such as updating a policy, without changing the operational routine that produced the gap. Another reason is partial implementation, where one team fixes their area, but other in-scope areas remain unchanged. A third reason is that the change works under ideal conditions, but fails under real workload pressure, so people revert to old habits or create workarounds. Remediation also fails when evidence is treated as the goal instead of control performance. If the organization produces a document that claims the control exists, but no one tests whether the control runs on schedule, risk remains. For beginners, it helps to see that risk reduction depends on repeated behavior, not on one-time activity. A control must work today, next month, and next quarter, even when staff rotate and systems change. Monitoring and validation exist because one-time fixes cannot guarantee ongoing discipline. Monitoring begins with clear remediation definitions, because you cannot track progress if you do not know what completion looks like. A remediation plan should include a clear description of the gap, the root cause, the corrective actions, the owner for each action, and the timeline. It should also include dependencies, such as whether one team must complete an inventory improvement before another team can implement patch metrics. Without this clarity, progress updates become vague statements like "we are working on it," which do not support accountability. For beginners, the key idea is that remediation plans should be written so someone outside the original team can understand them. That clarity also reduces the chance that actions drift over time, where the plan slowly changes into something easier that no longer addresses the original risk. When completion criteria are clear, monitoring becomes objective rather than political. Effective monitoring also requires a cadence, because remediation work can stall when attention shifts back to daily operations. Cadence means a predictable rhythm of check-ins, such as weekly or bi-weekly reviews for higher-risk issues and less frequent reviews for lower-risk issues. The cadence should be aligned to risk severity and the complexity of the remediation. Check-ins should focus on what was completed since the last review, what remains, what blockers exist, and whether timelines need escalation. For beginners, it is important to understand that cadence is not micromanagement. It is a control mechanism that keeps improvement work moving and keeps leaders informed early when delays occur. When the organization waits until the deadline to check status, it often discovers delays too late to respond. A steady cadence creates a stable feedback loop, which is one of the most reliable ways to maintain progress in complex organizations. Monitoring also needs escalation rules, because not every delay is equally acceptable. If remediation affects critical systems or regulated data, missed milestones should trigger escalation to leadership, not as punishment, but as resource and priority alignment. Escalation might involve reallocating staff time, adjusting project schedules, or approving temporary compensating controls. Without escalation, remediation becomes a low-priority background task that never finishes, and the organization continues to carry risk while believing the issue is being handled. For beginners, escalation can feel uncomfortable because it sounds confrontational, but in a mature program, escalation is simply a transparency mechanism. It ensures that leaders who own risk understand whether the organization is meeting its commitments. It also prevents quiet failure, where teams are overwhelmed but feel pressured to hide that reality. Escalation protects the organization by aligning decisions with real progress rather than with optimistic assumptions. Validation starts where monitoring ends, because once actions are reported complete, you must confirm they actually solved the problem. Validation has two parts: implementation validation and effectiveness validation. Implementation validation confirms that the change was made as described, such as confirming that a process step exists, that roles are assigned, and that required tooling or configurations are in place. Effectiveness validation confirms that the change produces the desired outcome, such as access being removed on time, patching happening within required windows, or incident response records being complete and consistent. Beginners often stop at implementation validation because it is easier, but effectiveness validation is what proves risk reduction. For example, creating an access review procedure is implementation, but showing that the review happened for several cycles and resulted in actual access adjustments is effectiveness. Validation should include objective evidence rather than self-reported success, because self-reporting can be biased even when people are honest. When validation is objective, it builds confidence that the remediation is real. A key technique for validation is sampling, because you do not always need to verify everything to verify that a control is operating. Sampling means selecting a representative set of cases, such as a set of access changes, a set of patched systems, or a set of vendor reviews, and checking whether the process was followed correctly and whether evidence exists. Sampling should be designed to include higher-risk cases, because risk often concentrates in privileged access, critical systems, and sensitive data. For beginners, sampling can be understood as checking whether the control behaves consistently across different scenarios. If the control works only for easy cases but fails for complex ones, risk remains. Validation through sampling also reduces audit disruption, because the organization develops a habit of evidence review before auditors request it. It becomes part of internal assurance, not just external compliance. Over time, consistent sampling can reveal patterns that lead to further improvement, such as identifying where the process is confusing or where teams need better training. Another important part of validating remediation is verifying that root causes were addressed rather than merely patched around. If a finding was caused by unclear ownership, validation should confirm that ownership is now assigned and functioning, meaning people understand responsibilities and perform them on schedule. If a finding was caused by incomplete inventory, validation should confirm that inventory completeness improved and that metrics now cover the full population. If a finding was caused by a process that was too burdensome, validation should confirm that the redesigned process is actually used rather than bypassed. For beginners, this is the idea that controls exist within human behavior. If the remediation does not change behavior, risk will return. Root cause validation therefore often includes interviews or observations, not just document checks. It is reasonable to confirm that teams can explain the new process and can show evidence that it is being followed. When root causes are validated, remediation becomes durable rather than temporary. Sustained validation is the final step that proves risk is truly reduced, because controls can work immediately after remediation and then drift back over time. Sustained validation means checking the control after multiple cycles to ensure the behavior is stable. For example, if a control requires quarterly access reviews, sustained validation might confirm completion for multiple quarters. If a control requires ongoing vulnerability remediation, sustained validation might track metrics over months to confirm improvement is maintained. Beginners should understand that time is part of control effectiveness. A control that works once is not yet a reliable control. This is why many compliance programs require evidence over a period, not just a point-in-time fix. Sustained validation also helps detect new changes that could break the control, such as system migrations or staffing changes. When sustained validation is built into the program, risk reduction becomes a maintained state rather than a temporary achievement. Finally, monitoring and validation must feed back into governance and communication so the organization stays honest about its risk posture. When remediation is successful, the organization should update risk registers, close findings with evidence, and communicate what changed so teams know the new expectations. When remediation is delayed or ineffective, the organization should communicate that reality, adjust plans, and implement compensating controls to manage exposure. For beginners, the key lesson is that risk management is not about declaring success. It is about maintaining accurate awareness and making deliberate choices. Monitoring and validation support that awareness by turning progress and effectiveness into visible evidence. They also build trust with auditors and stakeholders because the organization can demonstrate follow-through and sustained improvement. A program that monitors and validates remediation consistently becomes less reactive and more resilient because it learns from gaps and proves that it can fix them. Monitoring and validating remediation actions until risk is truly reduced is the discipline of ensuring that corrective actions become reliable control behavior, not just completed tasks. Monitoring keeps remediation moving through clear definitions, regular cadence, and escalation when progress stalls, aligning resources and priorities with real commitments. Validation then proves both implementation and effectiveness using objective evidence and targeted sampling, confirming that changes address root causes rather than only symptoms. Sustained validation checks that controls continue operating across multiple cycles so improvements do not fade after initial attention passes. When this discipline is integrated into governance, findings are closed with credible evidence, risk posture remains honest, and the organization gains real resilience instead of paper closure. The result is a compliance and security program that does not merely respond to findings, but consistently reduces the likelihood and impact of future failures through verified, lasting change.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.